Hi, thanks for hanging around for the last talk of the day. My name is Joe Morley and I manage partnerships at Facebook, specifically the part of partnerships that's relevant to advertising technology and marketing technology. So we have a global program at Facebook which is called the Facebook Marketing Partner Program, and I have the pleasure of welcoming today on stage Anssi Russi, he's the COO of Smartly, one of our largest global partners. And Anssi is going to be sharing a little bit of information today on that journey that Smartly have been on over the past few years with specific reference to, I mean, if I was to highlight two things for me that stand out about their business, having followed them over the last few years, it's, I think, as the title of the talk suggests, it's product development speed and their ability to iterate and continuously ship products faster than anybody else. And also, and we'll get into this a little bit later on perhaps, which is how Smartly is set up and how they've been able to build a global business and, more importantly, service a global business from a centralized location, which is mostly in Helsinki, although it is now starting to expand. So a few words about Anssi before we get into the questions. He's been at Smartly obviously since the very early days. He's background in engineering and product management. He's 15 years experience working across all types of SaaS platforms, and when he's not building SaaS platforms, he's building a lot of stuff in his summer cottage outside of Helsinki. We might have time to get into that a little bit later on. He also plays rock guitar and likes spending his time playing hockey as well. So we'll see if we can get into some of that at the end. So Anssi, listen, let's hear from you. If you could tell us a little bit about who Smartly is and what are the problems Smartly are solving in the marketing automation space.
Yeah, sure, true. So Smartly is a marketing automation company. We're a Facebook marketing partner. Fairly young company. Smartly was founded in summer 2013. The first 6 months was basically putting the first version of the product together, and then we went commercially live in January 2014. And yeah, taking steps one by one, we first went outside Finland to Nordics, and then to Europe, and eventually to US, and then in Asia. And during these 4 years, we have basically grown as a company who has 160 people in 6 different offices. We build a SaaS product on top of the Facebook platform, and actually we provide services on top of that, like account management for our customers, 24/5 customer support, which we have done since the beginning real time. And everybody in our company does that, which is a great aspect. I recommend for you to do that.
And so just before we get in any further, could you summarize very briefly what type of clients Smartly are dealing with in what areas of what verticals and the type of services you're providing to them?
Yeah.
Or maybe if you want to name some of them.
Yeah, there's naturally a life cycle of that as well. Like in the beginning, naturally, we were poking around everywhere and trying to find like what resonates the best, because that was kind of like building the minimum viable product and everything. And we saw that, okay, there's a huge demand. This was 2014 in the e-commerce space, and we went full ahead on that one. So that was kind of like, after poking around, like clear focus, let's deep dive there. Off we went, and we worked a lot with modern, very demanding, very sophisticated advertisers, and they really helped us to build a great product. And naturally, e-commerce being still one of the key verticals, but naturally we have expanded also to other verticals along the way, to travel, retail, media agencies, etc.
Okay, so mostly e-commerce and more recently travel and retail.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about the origins of the company and maybe the founding team, just before we get into a little bit of what Smartly looks like today? But where was it coming from? How did you guys decide as a group of founders to get to operate in this space and not somewhere else in SaaS?
Yeah, it actually started from like observations. So our CEO and CTO had a company before Smartly where they tried to build a different kind of product, and that failed. But while they were working with a lot of like different companies, especially gaming companies, they saw a shift of advertising budget moving away from Google to Facebook. So they saw that, and at the same time they heard that there's a lot of challenges around this space. that was also the first time, like 2012, when I met these guys, and I was working as a COO in an e-commerce company, and we were scaling very rapidly at that point because of like Facebook advertising, and it was kind of like these experiences set them to kind of like build the first version of Smartly and start a new company, and yeah, that was how we got started.
Very good. And would you, that initial group that was there of founders, would you consider was a very balanced team, or what kind of backgrounds was the first group of Smartly founders coming from?
Yeah, this is interesting. Our CEO is basically, he's always been a CEO founder and never worked in any other company. And he started kind of like an entrepreneur society in Helsinki, so he was very, very networked person, and he saw that the only thing he can do is create a startup. And our CTO is kind of like this young wizard kid who has just like always coded. And but that was basically the things that they knew that they can do well, and that was like we got reintroduced by our first investor, because then I have a long background on the kind of like operations side, and they saw that that's kind of like what is needed there. And yeah, then it's been, after that, kind of like you're always looking for extra people who are always bringing that that skill to the team that you're lacking.
Okay. So one of the things that I would find most unique perhaps about Smartly, we deal with lots of companies in the global program. Many of them are, of course, from the West Coast and from Silicon Valley. We have a lot of Israeli companies, unsurprisingly. We have companies from London and Paris. But Smartly are a little bit different because they're from Helsinki. And, more importantly, the majority of the company and the majority of the team is still based there in Helsinki. So could you talk a little bit about that, the advantages and disadvantages of the location, perhaps?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think like one of the good things that happened for us was in Finland was the downfall of Nokia. Yeah. Because like it was such a huge company and dominated a lot, but basically the downfall of Nokia started a movement that there needs to be something else. And then basically the startup ecosystem started to kind of evolve. And naturally, when you're coming from a small country like Finland, 5.5 million population, it's really great, because if you want to build something, you need to start thinking like going abroad since day one. Mm-hmm. And that's a great thing, and the ecosystem has developed, and we start to have investors, and then we started to have, like, when we got the great first examples like Rovio and Supercell, they really demonstrated that very quickly you can achieve great things, although you're coming from the very northern parts of Europe.
Yeah. Okay, so you had some good role models in people like Rovio and Supercell.
Yeah, and a lot of great people who are also like helping other companies in the ecosystem to be successful.
Yeah. Okay. We've had over the course of today and tomorrow, we'll have a lot of different companies operating, a lot of different SaaS companies operating in a lot of different industries. What obviously Smartly are in. Let's say, advertising technology or marketing technology. But if we talk a little bit about ad tech, how would you describe the ad tech industry to work in? You know, you've worked in other industries before, building SaaS platforms. What's different, for better or for worse, about ad tech? Just so the audience can understand a little bit the context.
Yeah, the most interesting thing is really the speed of the ecosystem is totally different compared to any other where I have worked previously. And speed, it's basically, there's a lot of new things happening all the time, and it creates new opportunities all the time. Naturally, if you're moving too slow, it's naturally presenting you like risks at the same time. But that really, like, ad tech, it's global, it's fast, and constantly evolving, and you really don't know where it's going, which makes it very exciting.
Yeah. And how, you know, let's say if we compare to CRM or ERP, some of the other ones you may have worked in, the expectations of clients regarding, you know, the software itself and how frequently you'll have updates, product development speed in general. Is there a big gap there between your typical, say, e-commerce or even some of the media agency clients regarding your solution?
Yeah, there is a huge gap, and I see that the other industries should really look at the ad tech industry and learn about the speed. And there's like a night and day difference when I was building like integration software to integrate different ERPs, and it was kind of like you have 2-week sprints or whatever. And the one thing we got right at Smartly was that we understood in the beginning that the ecosystem is totally different. And it would be kind of like failure to take like a model or a process from some other ecosystem and adapt it to this one because it's so different. And we basically started designing from the beginning our tools and processes in a way that we can deploy like 20 times a day in a safe manner.
Okay, 20 times a day. So let's talk a little bit then. That's quite ambitious. How is the team structured to be able to deliver that with confidence?
Yeah, here once again, I'm a big believer that organizations, tools, and processes should be really thought like customers first, the ecosystem first, the domain first. And we saw that we also need to structure a little bit differently. We ended up to a structure where we have very strong independent teams. And each team have their own area of responsibility. If it's on the product side, they might own a certain part of the product. If it's on the customer side, they might own a certain region, certain market on there. And basically everything that they do, they are the owner there. So we try to make sure that the people can execute as quickly as possible. This makes them very, very agile as well and keeps like everything close to the customers.
So if you have that kind of top to bottom ownership in individual teams, is there any issues around the information flow between the teams then? There may not be such a dependency, an intra-team or inter-team dependency between different people working on different areas, or how do you address that?
Yeah, that is a big, that usually is a challenge, and we can very much see that when companies especially start to grow, that silos start to be built on. But it's also something that we really put a lot of emphasis in the beginning, and we facilitate a lot of this kind of like communication between different teams. And it's always hard, and especially like when you establish new offices to abroad, it becomes even more harder. But we have certain ways to do it, like we always in the company, we have started with Monday morning breakfast and sharing kind of like the business updates and learnings to the teams, and always on Fridays we end up with product demos, making sure that everybody kind of like knows where the product is going. A lot of like other things as well. Internal communication, like we do it in chat, no internal emails or anything like that. So, but it's tough, but you can make it work.
Yeah, and I'm thinking particularly now that Smartly it's kind of over 100, 150 or 160 now. So those things which might have been a lot easier to coordinate and organize, like the Monday morning breakfasts or the Friday product development demos, how have you adapted those as the company has grown? Like if you think back to when there was maybe 50 people in Smartly, now there's 150, have you had to change the mechanisms of those, or?
Yeah, of course, like we need to evolve them as the company is growing, and the agendas change all the time a little bit, but you can make it work as long as you're kind of like listening to the people, especially those who are on the other side. But what comes to, for example, this one, we always like record these sessions, and every office have their own Monday breakfast. They have their own Friday demos taking place all the time. So we figured out a mechanism how to make it work.
Yeah. And on that subject, as you expand into other offices, what would you say, or what would you share with the audience are your principal learnings from that, from going from quite a centralized team, it's still quite a centralized team, into landing in some of the other markets where you are and establishing your first presence? Like how did you keep the culture? How could you transplant that very strong culture you had, or you have in Helsinki, to these other small offices where you may just have one or two people initially?
Yeah. Well, the one thing is that many times I've seen that where companies fail, that they think too much like headquarters first, whereas in these situations you really need to think about the remote office first. And whatever kind of like practice you have and how you would execute it, you need to think the remote office first. I have the lucky situation that I worked a year from a bedroom corner from Sydney to Helsinki, 2008. And
that was a bit of a change. You were in Sydney and everybody else was in Helsinki.
Yeah, that's true. And the second thing really on that side is to make sure kind of like that the communication really flows between the teams. And we basically founded these offices so that we sent the first people from Helsinki there. And basically these people, these more experienced people, they took the culture with them. And then we started hiring locally and integrating those people. And then naturally these people have returned back. But that was our way of making sure that and then there's naturally like continuous traveling between the offices so that people stay connected all the time.
Okay. And if we talk a little bit about the product development again, as you've gone from, say, servicing a small number of very large clients in very specific locations to servicing a broader number of clients across a far more international footprint, has that impeded at all that product development speed that was your competitive advantage in the early years when it comes to shipping new versions or incorporating new functionality? Do you think the broader international footprint has slowed that down, or?
I wouldn't say that it has slowed us down at the moment, but naturally, like when you get more and more customers, you get a lot more feedback. So it has once again been, it's much more easier when you're working with 10 customers and you only get feedback from them compared to the 550 we have at the moment. So naturally, we had to evaluate and make our product feedback process more efficient. But I think it's even greater opportunity if you get it right. At the moment, we're still working and it has worked for us very well that we have been able to choose great customers whom we work close with. And it doesn't mean that it's the same customer like during the past 4 years. We change them all the time, depending on when we went to travel vertical, we managed to work with one great customer, and together with them we were able to build those functionalities to our product. And that has worked for us very well. But it's also like the great asset of working in different companies and different offices is that you get perspective from other markets, and if you're able to get that feedback correctly, you're basically having advantage over your competitors.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment on kind of working with especially demanding large customers, but I wanted to remind the audience that we have this app here as well where you can type in your questions. So I'm not sure if there was questions on the last session or not, but if you'd like to please add in questions to that, we can address them for the last few minutes. So I think I have some here already. Can you see these also?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
So we have one here, which is how do you manage, which is kind of what I was going to get into actually now, the conflict between product roadmap delivery versus new large client specific requirements.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Usually how we do it when we do our roadmap, we don't book it like our engineering resources fully.
Yeah.
So we allocate certain % of the time to do the roadmap, those kind of like big themes that there is. So we leave room for those like specific requirements that there is. But that naturally requires like openness and transparency between working with big customers, because we don't do everything that they but ask us to do. And we've always had, and we have told to our customers that we will implement all the functionality which we see that are kind of like generic, but we don't do like customer specific solutions. There's a fine line in there.
So that's a good one. And there's another one here, which is kind of the million-dollar question for any software company is, how do you decide what to build and what to ditch from that wish list? So once you've decided, yeah, these are generic enough, we need to build this, how do you prioritize that?
That requires a lot of like conversation between the teams. We have quite many product managers. Everybody's very, very hands-on. But it starts from the fact that when we're always like Fridays presenting what engineers present what they have done to the product, they also present their backlogs, and everything is visible in our company, like everybody can see, and there's a healthy culture of people kind of like coming and questioning that why are we doing this instead of this. And that has built a great like culture that the people who are responsible of the prioritization, and we basically like our product teams, they are each responsible of their own backlog. So, and they also need to be able to justify to every single person that why are we doing things this way? Yeah. So we have taken it to the team level. That requires a lot of like effort to make sure that the teams have the right context. That's why we also like frequently even fly some of our selected customers to Helsinki for workshops, so that they work directly with our engineering team, so that they will get directly the feedback. But naturally, we will go wrong sometimes as well.
So democracy works in that case, does it?
Yeah, and sometimes you need to also make the leadership team decisions when...
Okay, it reminds me of the quote on democracy where somebody was kind of saying, you know, democracy is not perfect by a long shot, but it's a lot better than any of the alternatives, so we'll stick with democracy from a political perspective. We'll go, are we over time or? Okay, last 5 minutes, so we'll keep going with the questions from the audience, if that's okay. So how big is the product team and how is it structured?
Yeah, we have at the moment about 60 engineers at the moment, and well, that includes the product managers as well and designers. There are currently 6 different teams. So our philosophy there is that when we hire more people, occasionally we will restructure those teams. That will also give people the possibility to switch teams so that they will get a broader context for the product. And as mentioned, like each team, they own their own backlog and execute according to that one.
Yeah, okay. And another question which I've seen pop up, a related one here, which is around customer support versus new features. And I think that's particularly important for Smartly because, as I said at the beginning, I think what a lot of people would admire about Smartly as a company is how you have been able to deploy fundamentally a core SaaS technology offering from this one centralized location, but with a very thick service layer around that. So how do you decide to allocate resources on new product development versus servicing the existing customer base and their needs? Yeah. Because as you did say, they are quite special and demanding in their own way.
Yeah, it works, and there's basically like during, for example, this is all with, while we're working with these focus customers, we fly them to Helsinki and we visit them as well. We open our roadmap for them, and we basically need to also justify why we are building these things, and usually we come to a happy outcome on that one. The support side is really interesting because like we're doing it in a very, very different way compared to many, many other companies. Like everybody at Smartly still does support. Naturally, depending on your role, you might do less or more. But usually our account managers do 1 support shift in a week. I do bi-weekly at the moment. And that's interesting because in a product company, everybody doing customer support helps everybody to stay close to the customer and close to the product. And it's also very healthy for the engineers also to be there on the front line answering the customer's questions.
And that's, again, that reminds me of one of my favorite quotes about Smartly, which is somebody once said that all of the salespeople are engineers and all of the engineers are salespeople. That was certainly back in the early days. Is that still a true statement to make as you're growing?
That is still true, and we really celebrate those things. We have had this, like we fly sometimes engineers to meet customers and, or let's say potential customers, and then they basically come out of the meeting with a signed order form. It's really amazing that there is. And but the same thing on the sales teams, that we have also looked for people, different kind of people with different backgrounds to our customers team, and we have also people who have like great engineering skills working in the customer teams. And sometimes they're able to do like small fixes to the product or implement a small feature pretty much on the same day when they're meeting on a customer, and that's really powerful and convincing.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more here. Somebody's asking books. Which books or blogs would you recommend on development speed? Or are you very self kind of knowledge sharing rather than looking outside?
We read a lot. Like the key part of our culture is like maximize learning, because it's also like how this ecosystem works, that there's so much new things coming up all the time. Like it doesn't matter what you know today, because that will be obsolete very soon. You need to constantly learn new things and also make sure teach other people. So we are constantly reading a lot of things, and naturally as the company is growing, we need to evolve as well. There's a lot of like great blogs and everything that comes from like Ben Horowitz is always amazing. Like first round things. There's a great one, for example, Speed as a Habit article.
Speed as a Habit.
Speed as a Habit, yeah.
Okay.
That's a great one. Everybody should be reading that one.
Okay, excellent. So one last question. We'll diverge a little bit from technology. If you weren't building, we're talking about building SaaS software products here. What's the most interesting thing you've built that's not technology lately? Talking about your your cabin and holiday home in,
that's really
outside of
interesting.
Helsinki.
Yeah, we have in a small, Finland has a really nice archipelago. I really recommend for you to travel there at some point. We have a family cottage in a small island. It's been there for 55 years and naturally requires all the time little maintenance. And yeah, 2 years ago I had a 3-month project with my dad of basically building kind of like a small harbor there, and it required kind of like getting 25 tons of stuff traveling with boat to the island and all sorts of things. But it's really amazing to build something that you can see already and feel that it will last for decades.
Fantastic. So nice distraction from building software as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. So thanks a lot. We've run out of time, unfortunately. I really appreciate you coming over to talk to us, Anssi. I know you have a really important board meeting tomorrow, so you need to get back for that. And also, you've just announced your 20 million round, so I want to congratulate you on that as well. So
yeah,
thanks a lot for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you.